For those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting today, so my name's Ben Wheatley. I'm one of the account managers here in Northern Europe, London Stock Exchange Group being one of those, hence we have Alex here today. So today's about bringing in a number of our financial service organisations to talk about the unique mixture of highly regulated organisation, the requirement to develop very quickly, so speed to market being a key element to that, and that presents itself with a unique set of challenges. There's also the need to do less with more, given the current macroeconomic climate. So I'm hoping by the end of today you will have a good understanding of some challenges that the guys have been through their respective organisations, and hopefully apply that to your own organisations moving forward. So, gentlemen, first of all, thank you very much for joining the panel today. I guess just to allow you to introduce yourselves a little bit in terms of your roles, your organisations, and some of the key data-driven initiatives that you're working through at the moment. So, Nicola, I'll start with yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Nicola. I'm head of IT architecture and shared services for BPER Banca, and I report into the CIO. BPER Banca is a regional bank in Italy that grew very fast in the past 3 years. We jumped from being number 6, number 7, up to number 3 in Italy, and currently we reached a national dimension. So in order to sustain this growth, our challenges are making happen a transformation program that comprises everything you can imagine in banking. So we started rebuilding the direct channels. We launched a brand new mobile app that jumped into the customer ratings from a not so good rating that I won't disclose up to the current value of 4.6. That is quite good, I think. Then we started working on the end-to-end modernization of the bank, from the core banking side to process optimization, and to trying to starting becoming a data-driven company and applying AI to every fundamental aspect of our business. And that's why everything I said is fed by data, and that's why we need to improve our capability to handle data at a scale with security and safety.
It's fair to say you've been busy,
yeah,
by the sounds of it. And Alex, over to you.
I'm Alex Wilshere. I am a database development manager within the benchmark and indices area of the London Stock Exchange. So my team and I look after our index platform. My role's, I guess, sort of a mix of database administration, DevOps, database tooling, acting as a point of escalation for the developer community, looking into new database features, new database technology, like Delphix, kind of itself.
Brilliant. And finally, Keith.
Excellent. So I'm Keith Ndhlovu, an engineering chapter lead at Metro Bank. And Metro Bank is a UK-based retail and commercial bank. We're well known for our customer service, right? We've always ranked first when it comes to our customer service within branch. And that's one of the things that we'd like to continue to maintain. And there's a key enabler for that. Data is very important. Right now, you can open a bank account at Metro Bank in less than 10 minutes. And to enable that, you need the right data at the right place and at the right time. Right? And my role within this is to accelerate the delivery of value to our end customers and colleagues, and to do this with quality in mind in a safe way.
Brilliant. Well, welcome again. So I think it's fair to say you can each be described as being on the front lines of innovation for your individual companies, and you're facing some of the challenges that I hinted at, that's not necessarily unique to financial services, but certainly have a unique perspective on it. So I guess starting with you, Nicola, I'd like to understand, what are the top challenges that were facing you that led you down the path of Delphix?
Yeah, basically, as I said, we are transforming the overall bank because we got number 3 in the nation, and the expectation are that we behave like number 3, but we have to grow very fast in order to satisfy that. That means that we have a huge book of work of projects that has to be delivered in time, and those projects are fueled by test environment and data where we can prepare and deliver the software before we are able to ship it to our customers. And in parallel, we have to be ready for further merger and acquisition, because you don't know, we may grow, we may continue to grow, and that means again data and environments to simulate the next merger and acquisition operation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's the challenge, and everything has to be done by keeping in control the cost side of the equation, because when you merge, your shareholders expect to consolidate things and to improve the bottom line.
Yeah. So I think it's fair. I mean, we've spoken before, right? But I think it's fair to say that in that process, data was ultimately the bottleneck in sort of you achieving some of those speed to market elements.
In doing so, we have a very great diversity of technology. We are still mostly mainframe based. Most of the core banking data are there, but we have all the relational database platform for distributed system. And now, as I was said, we are starting working with the AI that brings new challenges and the cloud and the hybrid cloud that has been described this morning as well.
Brilliant. Well, we'll absolutely touch on that in a second. Alex, same question to yourself.
Costs, I think, it's going to be a lot of people's message here. We made the decision to move all of our production and non-production environments to the public cloud about 2 years ago. So from kind of having a few on-prem environments, that has increased quite significantly over the last 2 years. I mean, it's improved productivity. You know, developers like it, but there is a pressure on costs, in particular storage, because our environments are quite complex. The nature of developing indices means that we need full copies of production data brought into lower environments to kind of enable teams to do their work, which means massive multiplication of that sort of original production storage onto the lower environment. So looking at Delphix to minimize that.
And to give the audience, I guess, an idea of the scale, you mentioned those full production copies. What size of databases are we talking here?
I mean, it varies a little bit, but let's call it around 10 terabytes kind of per environment.
Yeah, so fairly sizable.
Yeah.
All right.
And finally, to yourself, Keith.
Yes. So for us, I don't know, you may have noticed that banking is a very competitive space, right? You walk down the high street, you'll see many different banking organizations that are there. So one key thing to differentiate yourself is to have speed to market, to be able to react to customer needs really fast, right? We've started a digital transformation journey, changing our ways of working as well, to be able to do exactly that. So being able to get data from production at speed in a safe and controlled manner, for us, that's a challenge that will help us increase our bottom line. Yep. So, we'll do this reducing costs as well, but there are other additional opportunities of actually increasing profits.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I think there's a running theme in terms of the challenges that you mentioned there, speed to market being one of those, but certainly compliance being the other. And I want to dig into that as a common thread, Nicola, to yourself. Just, you know, you sit at quite a strategic level within your organisation, so it'd be good to understand what compliance means to you. You know, what responsibilities does that require of you? You know, technically speaking.
Okay, I will start defining the concept with my role as an architect, because I need to think broader rather than the specific. And so compliance for me is a way in which we show our customer that they can trust us and they can trust putting their money and their data and their personal data with us. So compliance from a broader perspective is not just complying to the laws, but build the most important capital that a bank has, that is the trust of their clients. Stemming from that, my role is to translate those principles in technical solutions that have to be applied effectively to the overall life cycle of the software. And basically, this is where I step in with my team, and we design and select solutions to enable all the developers in the teams to work confidently with the data and enable us to gain the trust of our customers in a safe way.
And I guess just taking that down another level deeper, what's the approach you're taking with Delphix to achieve that? Can you describe your deployment and some of your architecture in a bit more detail?
Yeah, we talked a little bit earlier. We have a lot of databases from different technologies, so and we need to bring those data in our environments, mainly for developing new application or new version of our application. But also we have the need from the operational side in production support, where we need to download the data from production and have the support teams being able to reproduce defects or tweaks or quirks, customer issues that can be solved only by looking at the very specific data. But we have to do this in a compliant way. So if, generally speaking, if we have contractors, they are not allowed to see live data from the client, and we have to anonymize that. So those are the first two major use cases for Delphix. And then we are looking into also evolutionary scenarios where we would like to feed the AI engines with continuous data at scale, and that's another space.
Amazing. Innovating. So,
yeah.
And Keith, obviously, you also called out compliance and masking as an essential part of your program. So how are you set up to provide masking, touching across some people, process, and technology aspects?
Yes. So working in a highly regulated environment, it is very important to make sure that we do not have any personal identifiable information where it does not need to be. So masking is crucial for us. And our journey started off with an internal script that we built ourselves that quickly grew legs and became this beast, this monster that no one wants to maintain. It's very difficult to maintain. Right? We then paused and then reflected and explored the path of synthetic data. Right? With synthetic data, it's great, but then it also has its limitations. Right? Now we're at a stage where we're working with Delphix to build a much more comprehensive solution that's easier to maintain, that has transparency built in as well, will enable us to engage our key stakeholders, our data owners, to see exactly what data, what PII data is in there, how we have masked it, and they'll be part of the process to approve it, right, to make sure that the data that we're using is safe. Right? That's where we are with our planning.
Good. And you mentioned synthetic data wasn't quite right for you guys. Could you just maybe allude to some of the downsides to that and why you felt Delphix masking was a better solution to achieve your challenges?
So with synthetic data, it works very well for proving that your change will work with the new customers that you've just created. However, there is no guarantee that it will work with customers that are in production, some of which were created over 10 years ago. Right? So for you to be able to get that confidence that your change will work with all of the customers, you need highly representative data in your test environments. Right? And it was great to hear earlier as well that Delphix will also be introducing synthetic data into the product. So having bought synthetic data and the ability to mask production data in one place will definitely help to drive our strategy forward.
Brilliant. It's a really good insight. So I think obviously the other running thread between our discussion so far has been around speed to market, and therefore if we've got to do more but with less resource, then we've got to focus in on things like developer productivity. So I guess, Alex, data virtualization, or what we call continuous data, is very much part of or very important part of your program. And obviously part of that value is simply addressing the sheer amount of data, which you've already alluded to in some of those non-production environments. So could you maybe just describe for the audience what the kind of challenges you had around that and what that represents, and also some of the costs around maintaining it? You mentioned costs earlier, and obviously what the opportunity to improve that looks like.
Yeah, so we do have a complex environment. Some of it is the volume of data and needing to bring that down from production into lower environments. Some of it is the fact that it's not a single monolithic database. It's an environment is a mixture of Sybase and SQL Server databases kind of about 20 in all, which need to be brought together and brought down into lower environments, referentially intact, because we have replication processes that kind of run between them.
Yeah.
So that adds in a great deal of complexity to kind of providing them. So we have an in-house process that was built that allows us to, on the cloud, sort of build ephemeral environments to a sort of a certain degree, but there are limitations in terms of what that can actually do. It's limited to sort of nightly backups being processed. Because it's in the cloud, because we have sort of, strong differentiation between prod and non-prod environments, there's a lot of copying of data, there's a lot of moving parts to kind of make it work. That takes time, and so there is quite a large amount of latency of data from production to be able to brought down into the lower environments. And for developers, maybe that matters a little bit less, but for sort of UAT, QA, and especially sort of like third line support and incident, I guess sort of resolution, it's quite critical to have, much more rapid availability of environments and reducing that latency as much as possible. And that's kind of where Delphix comes in, largely for us, that we're hoping. I don't think it will massively improve our environment provisioning time. It'll probably cut it down by about 50%, but on the latency of data side from production, it's going to, on a good day, we can provision an environment probably about with 9 hours lag, and in the worst case scenario, about 33 hours, depending on whether you've sort of got it in time to get today's backup or the prior days, whereas Delphix, given its continuous ingestion, replication, it should reduce it. We're aiming for somewhere in the region of an hour from transactions being committed in prod to being available if you wanted it in a lower environment.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to say that when we were doing the POV, it was predominantly focused on cost saving. You mentioned that that was pretty important. Also time to provisioning data, but we, throughout the course of the process, we tried to identify secondary and tertiary benefits, and some of those were around some of those incident management elements. So could you maybe touch on that in a bit more detail?
Yeah, I think engaging with the community during a POC was really beneficial. Talking to kind of UAT about how we could improve their offering. Testers being able to bookmark and do work and roll back. They loved the idea. UAT were just sort of keen to have the ability to provision environments at a much more sort of granular point in time when they wanted to, and improve their availability. If something goes wrong with our existing process, it can throw sort of an entire test cycle off, because you're sort of left sort of scrambling and reversing and trying to get it to the right point in time for them. So minimizing those risks and improving their productivity would be kind of a massive improvement for them. And third line support, like I say, kind of reducing that latency that nobody wants to be fixing issues in production. If you can bring data down into a lower environment to give teams the time and the latitude to make changes in a safer space, then that's inherently quite beneficial.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to hear some secondary and tertiary benefits that you've identified as part of that process. So, Keith, I guess just moving on to yourself, you've already alluded to move to a focus around agile development model and what that brings to you from a productivity perspective. Could you maybe just talk through around how your change in test data management has helped some of those elements, and do you have any measurable outcomes that you can share with the audience to help represent that?
Okay. Yeah, so 3 years ago, we fully embraced agile principles and DevOps principles. We changed our organization to reflect that as well, which meant that we have multiple feature teams delivering smaller change in chunks into production. But it's also worth calling out that we have had the Delphix continuous data, or what we refer to it as virtual databases within our environments for over 7 years. Right, and they've almost become a commodity. Right, they work, they run very well, and they're a commodity in a good way, just like electricity. Right? It's very useful, but you don't really think about how it's working, you don't think about it, you turn on the light switch, you expect it to be there, and it just works. It's only when it's not there and you realize that you're in trouble, right? You have a lot of issues. Right? But with having that capability to virtualize, it enabled us to provision the newly created feature teams environments that they needed without having to substantially increase the cost of storage to us. So that was a win for us, using a tool, a solution that we already had in place.
Yeah. And you were mentioning before and earlier around it's roughly 7 times more, I guess, releases than after than before Delphix.
Absolutely, yeah. So we are deploying into production frequently. It's smaller change, so there is less ceremony and less pressure with every deployment. Right? In the past, with some organizations that I have worked with, each deployment into production was an intense period because it was the only deployment that you had the opportunity to do in 6 months. But being able to deploy weekly, monthly, in some cases, each change is smaller, you need fewer people to support it. So that's definitely been a game changer for us.
Amazing, really good insights. Nicola, I just want to come to you very, very quickly. You obviously mentioned earlier in your introduction that BPER have gone from being a fairly regionally focused bank to a national through some of the M&A activity that you've been doing and setting new standards in terms of onboarding some of those merger and acquisition targets. I think you alluded to when we were planning for this session around some key elements where you've been able to digitize traditional Italian sort of products within the sort of northern Italy region. So could you maybe describe this technology shift in a bit more detail? And you mentioned AI earlier and how you've been able to leverage data to propel that shift forward.
Okay, I will share this with the audience because I think this is a really nice touch and very representative of the strength that comes from a region that has been able to grow and to be resilient and grow to a national scale. I think you may know BPER Banca comes from Emilia-Romagna, the land where you have Ferrari, Ducati, the Motor Valley packaging, and also you have Parmesan cheese. And that was one of the biggest businesses that the banks had and worked in a very traditional way. Cheese producer brought the cheese into deposits managed by the banks when they were ready to be matured in order to get to use them as a collateral for loans. Yeah, they are really precious and like gold. And this is how it worked. You can imagine this is good business, but it cannot scale. And a bank business is not managed cheese. And also the producers are not so happy that the bankers has the end of the cheese as well. So with a few partners, we applied the idea to adopt technology to solve this problem. And with IoT and blockchain, we solved the way that the cheese can stay in warehouses that are fully managed by the cheese producers. They are monitored, and we have very ample visibility of how the cheese is growing up. We temperature, humidity, tax, everything is monitored, and then the value of the collaterals can be evaluated and kept in the bank books without going to the physical inspection. And this also can be notarized using the blockchain that takes really the inventory of the cheese that is there, and this can be automatized.
I don't think anybody in the audience thought we'd get from data masking to developer productivity
yeah,
to Parmesan cheese. So I think it's a really great insight, and if that isn't innovation, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So look, final question to the three of you, and to allow us to leave a takeaway with the audience today. So if a lot of the audience, I'm sure, will relate to some of the challenges that you've been having collectively around, ultimately being able to deliver on speed to market and reduce that time to market, developer productivity and compliance. If you were to leave one bit of advice each for everybody in the room, starting with you, Nicola, what would that be in terms of that journey?
Well, the single piece of advice is prepare and think in advance.
Nice. Alex?
I think engage with people. We did very early on in the process and got a lot of potential use cases that we hadn't even thought about from different parts of the business.
Yeah.
You know, the bits that they got excited about, how they could perceive it as being implemented that would help them in their roles. So do that early, use that as kind of guidance, because not only do you then have engagement for your implementation, but you've also got hopefully more success kind of criteria.
I think that's really good advice. And finally, to yourself, Keith.
So I think for us, one key learning that we took away was that to succeed in continuous delivery, right, to be able to deploy regularly, you need comprehensive, well-trusted and reliable automated tests, right? And for you to be able to get those reliable automated tests, they have to be built before or alongside the application code. And therefore, that means that developers have to be heavily involved in the automation of test cases. And to get developers engaged in test automation, you have to provide them with the right tools, make that process as smooth as possible. And this is where Delphix is helping us, right, to simplify that process.
Amazing. Well, look, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you provide some insights into how you're resolving some of the challenges within your businesses, some very unique opportunities there as well. So yeah, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.